Jake, thank you so much for joining us today. Really pleased to have you on the podcast. How's everything going?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, mate. I'd love to have a chat. Everything's going pretty good. I barely like to complain. We like to focus on the positives around here, but yeah, we're just rolling on.
Yeah. All right, cool. And so at the time of this recording, we're pretty much exactly a week apart, or 8 days ago was Melbourne, and you got to race the big man Fred Kerley over the 200. I know we were just speaking sort of off air, making that sound really professional. Speaking off air before we started the recording, talking a little bit about some of the issues with the blocks and everything. So do you want to kind of just sort of give us a brief recap of that race and kind of what was going on at the start there?
Yeah, I think to start, it's really exciting that we have that level of competition back in Australia. Obviously, we've had the greats come 20 years ago and really enjoy the meets that we were able to put on in Australia a long time ago, way before my time. But no, to have a meet of that caliber, a gold level meet in Australia is really exciting, and hopefully that continues. And it's obviously a high level meet already when we're attracting guys such as Fred Kerley, the current world champion, and for me it was exciting to race him, even if it was in the two. He's definitely got pedigree in the two, not just the one. But no, for me it wasn't a great competition. Like I said, I don't like to complain too much, but just just the kind of mishaps that you can't really control. And for me, it was to do with blocks. I mean, sometimes they slip. I think a lot of high level sprinters, amateur sprinters, we've all had it happen where the blocks have slipped out. I've never had it happen to that capacity before. Where I think I sent one of the actual pads out into the crowd as a memento, but I face planted, or close to it anyway, racing the big man. So luckily for me, they pulled it back, but from there on, just zero confidence in the blocks, and they slipped again in the second start. And similar thing happened in the 100 too, where not my blocks, another lad's block slipped back in the first start, and I got a pretty good flyer in that first one that got pulled back. And then the officials are rushing us quite a bit to get back to blocks, I think, for broadcast. So it was all a bit happening, a bit everywhere, and I just yeah, didn't get to refocus. And for me, in my 100 meters, especially, a lot of my ability and my fast times come from my rocket start. I start for the Australian relay team, so that's kind of my gig. And then I have, I go from there and build the snowball, let's say. Um, but just missed starting 100, and then you're on the back foot, and we're fighting back. And we got the data back yesterday for the 100 as well. And pretty much I started my race 20 meters in. And so, you're basically doing a fly. I had nothing built, I had no momentum. So unfortunately I'm racing fast guys, and they capitalize on that, and they put you to bed pretty quickly. So no, an interesting competition. Fantastic night of athletics, I think, as a spectacle for people. And, exciting to see Fred come out to Australia along with a whole host of other premier athletes. But yeah, an interesting competition.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And is it a week, just over a week now until Sydney? And are you racing at Sydney as well?
Yeah, yeah. So Sydney Track Classic's the next one. A little bit less, a little bit, more of a chill meet. We're doing a lot of relay stuff. So we're trying to get the four men together.
Mhm.
Um, and we're trying some different combinations. So I've been really heavily involved in the relay program for about 5 years now.
Mhm.
And it's completely being, reshuffled. So I'll still be first, apparently. Nothing changes for me, but who my combinations are with, it will change, and we're trying some funky new things. We've got we've got some new guys on the scene that are running really quick. So hopefully they can pull us through some fast times. And obviously we had a bit of a mishap in Birmingham, so
Yeah.
we really want to get this down pat. And we know that with our flat speed, we can actually compete on the stage at the moment. So it's all about just getting the team to these comps. That's the difficult part.
So that's the target, is qualifying for Budapest World Championships later this year with the relay.
Yeah, we're really on the back foot for qualification. Obviously, COVID locked us out of World Relays a couple of years ago, and you saw some of the teams that qualified for the Olympics from that comp. So we would have pretty much walked into into quali there. But that's not an excuse. We just need to run the times, and the way it's set up now, we have to beat, I think, like Brazil or different random teams, Japan maybe, teams that haven't made top 8 in the last 2 majors is basically who you have to beat on time. So we have to run fairly quickly to qualify, quicker than most of the teams that have already qualified. So,
Right.
we're going to throw a Hail Mary at World Champs. If it lands, if it doesn't, we'll regather, go to World Relays next year and qualify for the Olympics. So I think that's the kind of game plan for the next 12 months. Yeah.
Okay. All right. But yeah, like going back to one of the points you made in terms of flat speed, I feel like Australia right now, I think it's like in quite an exciting spot in terms, well, both men and women sprinting, really. You kind of got a lot of people that are sort of like very competitive on the men's side, potentially around that, which is kind of like 10 flat to 10-2. A few people that are there, and that's probably depth that Australia has never had before in terms of the number of people that are sort of in that.
Yeah. I'd say hasn't had since the late 90s, early 2000s. I think, well, that was obviously when national record comes from with PJ.
Yeah.
And of course you had Sherva, you had my coach DeBella, a few guys back then, and they were successful on the world stage. I think coach has a bronze medal from the world champs in the relay. So that is a target that we have kind of on a pedestal. But like you said, we have the capacity to kind of fill those shoes now. And we had 2 men at the World Championships in the 100 meters last year, which is something we haven't had in a long time. I think in the last 20 years, there's been 3 or 4 of us that made the World Champs in the 100 meters. So the speed is there. The hunger to compete is there. It's just whether or not it's come together or not. And that often is, and I often say, I hate to be brutally honest with a lot of the relay guys, but it's like, it's a 4-piece puzzle and you take a quarter away and it's just never going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Like you can't have 3 guys rock up and 1 guy not, and then expect to have fireworks. And we're not at the kind of level that the Jamaicans and the Americans are, where they do a change in the warm up at the Olympics or the World Champs and Bob's your uncle, they go out and win it.
Yeah.
We have to be firing on all cylinders to be able to compete with these guys. And so I think that's been the missing piece, especially when you chuck COVID in the mix and the way our seasons work as well. If you do get to a certain level, you have to go over to Europe in the middle of the year, so you miss out on relay stuff. So the relay kind of, ebbs and weaves. So we have the capacity to do some damage, but it's up to me and the rest of the lads to kind of grab it by the neck and run with it.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I can imagine that does have its challenges in terms of, you get or you're on the verge of getting the qualifying time or whatever. You get to the end of your domestic season and then you've kind of got to persist and sort of like keep going for another 4, maybe 5 months, and try not necessarily hold a peak, but that kind of thing. It makes it a really, really long season for you.
Yeah,
right? Sort of
we call it
jumping around Europe trying to chase times and stuff.
Yeah, we call it double periodization over here. So I know for me it was a tough one last year. Having to be at our best to qualify for meets in March and then be at our best to then succeed at these meets in August. It's really hard to get right. And a lot of it comes down to load management, really analyzing your peaks and troughs and being productive in the way that you plan things and the way that you set out your year. So, I had a really successful front side of the year and then had a couple injuries and then faltered towards the back end of the year, and I'm kind of picking up the pieces now. Whereas some of my contemporaries had, like Farrell, for example, had a pretty crappy start of the year and then kind of flew home towards the end of last year and then is kind of carrying that momentum. So, that's a phenomenon you see a lot in track and field, whether, it comes to injury or confidence and stuff like that. So for us, it's quite difficult because we have effectively 2 seasons and we're chasing summer all year. But it's just, one of the luxuries of living in Australia, I suppose.
Yeah, there you go, mate. Yeah, it's Southern Hemisphere living. So, I mean, that's a really interesting point, which I'm going to get onto it now. I was going to get onto it a little bit later. So in terms of, so you finished up the Commonwealth Games in August. And then how long did you take off before you started your preparation for the 2023 domestic season?
It's hard for me to be anecdotal that would be something that was comparative to other people, because obviously I had quite a substantial injury
Right. Okay.
coming out of World Champs and Com Games. So for me, it was shut down pretty much,
Hmm.
lock up shop and come back when we can. Um, in saying that, I think a lot of athletes should, shut up shop for a bit, especially with us, when you're going for so long. So I think a lot of guys took anywhere between a month, 6 weeks to
Right.
3 months off. So, I came home middle of August, finished Com Games, licked my wounds and came home. And then I probably didn't start training again to the 1st of December. So I think that was when
All
I think
right.
I did some cross training 1st of November through to 1st of December, just to try and,
Yeah.
get the heart ticking again.
Yeah.
And then 1st of December, I think that's when I was like, okay, coach, we can go full load again. Let's not, waste any time. Let's just, jump in the water instead of dipping our toes. So, and saying that, pretty much from, September-ish onwards, I was doing like non-free weight stuff in the gym. So a lot of machine weights and stuff.
Okay.
Just to make sure I didn't atrophy and to keep my brain ticking along.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
probably would
Yeah.
have gone
Sure.
nuts. But yeah, for me, it's probably an interesting kind of timeline for when I came back, because I had a pretty bad injury. But I think a lot of guys do try and take a bit of a break, and I think it's really smart to do so, because you just need a reset. You need to completely turn the system off and then turn it back on when it's ready to go. Otherwise, you just burn yourself out.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly. So if it wasn't for the injury, and what was the injury, if you don't mind me asking?
So unfortunately, in the warm up at World Champs,
Hmm.
so in my final block start before I
Yeah.
headed to the core room, every sprint does the same thing. We do a block start last before we head to core room. I had a stress injury that we couldn't really pinpoint. So we didn't know it was there. We had a feeling something was wrong,
Hmm.
leading into Worlds, but we didn't know what was wrong. And then I had an acute episode in the warm up at Worlds where I developed a stress fracture in my spine.
Oh,
So
mate.
my L5 vertebrae
Uh-huh.
went crack, and I remember I came out my drive at the warm up track, and as I've stood up, it's almost like something's popped, and I'm like, ooh, kind of like winded me a bit. I was like,
Yeah.
well, that didn't feel fantastic, but put in the back of your mind, you've got to go run your first world champs now against, and I had the heat of death. It was crap, man. I had Johan, I had Litsile, who broke his world
Yeah.
record in
Yeah.
that heat. I
Yeah.
had Aaron Brown, I had Akani, like just
Yeah.
had
Loads
to
of
had to switch my mind back to the task at hand. But yeah, that was frustrating. The problem even wasn't the fracture; it was the way my muscles in my back responded to it. So
right.
in the race, I had a good start, good first 60, and then couldn't stand up. And I finished the race. I remember finishing the heat and going at World, and like, what the hell just happened? Like, why couldn't I sprint? I've been sprinting all year. Like, I know what it feels like. Why didn't I just do it then? But again, I didn't know what was wrong. I was like, well, my back's a bit stiff. Went away, went to Com Games, flew over to England, and yeah, just every muscle down the side of my back, from my shoulder down to my butt cheek, was just on lock.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
just full on, kind of helping to protect the area, I presume. And it was kind of I made the executive decision, like, stuff it. I'm here. I'm not gonna wuss out and go home. You know, that's no fun. It's probably a bit cooler if I just show up and run anyway. And so I was, obviously really close with the physios and docs over there at Com Games, and it came, and there was a bit of wishful ignorance,
Yeah.
keeping it in the back of my
Yeah.
mind. So don't tell Jake what we think it is, because then I might freak out or something. And I understood that. I remember pretty much the day before my heats just saying to the docs, like, look, I'm in a lot of pain. I'm in a lot of strife. Am I going to do more damage, or am I going to be able to run?
Mhm.
And then they gave me the green light. I said, look, I trust you guys that if there was something substantially wrong where it could affect me for the rest of my life, you'd pull me out. So cool, let's go run the heat. I came second in the heat, and then was really worse for wear after that one. And I ended up having a 3-hour warm up for the semi. vast majority of that was on the table, just trying to get my back to move because I
Right.
couldn't. It was just stiff as a board, so I had elbows and God knows what, just being wrenched through my back to get the muscles to let go. But yeah, that was my international journey, and so I really needed to shut up shop after that.
Yeah, no wonder you didn't want to
That
start
year.
running again until December.
Yeah, well, oh, man, I was chomping at the bit because clinically, once the muscles settled down, I felt fine.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
just a little crack in my back, and I'd had it. I had it as a junior. I had a similar injury,
Right.
stressy as a junior. And the way it was explained to me is when sprinters, you know, achieve that maximum velocity, they lock their hips to try and put tension through the hip flexor.
Okay.
So they really arch the back, the lower part of their spine through their hips. And unfortunately for the spine, there's parts of it where it jams up against each other and there's nowhere to go. And with the amount of impact that we put into the track, it just rams right back through and slams into the bottom of your spine. And yeah, it's not too fun. But yeah, conservative docs were trying to pull me from this season, just let it fully heal over and blah blah blah. But I was telling them I'd be a bloody praying mantis by the time I
Yeah.
came out of hiding and had no muscle to me, and I'd be useless, and I'd have to have a whole another year to try and get back. So once my doc and my physio said, "Look, you're clinically fine. There's a little bit of crack left, but it looks like it's bridging. It's going to be difficult for you to make it worse." I said, "Stuff it. I'm going to jump straight into training." And I said to coach, "Look, if I have any issues, that's when we pull back. As soon as I feel something, that's when we pull back." And so far, it's been pretty good. Obviously, I feel like an old man sometimes when I wake up, and I got pretty stiff back, but that's professional sport. You got to keep on keeping on.
Yeah, okay. All right. But like so you do occasionally still get sort of like some sort of symptoms, but generally it's okay at the moment.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to whinge and mope too much. I think I often say if I don't have a niggle or if I'm not sore, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
So that's what we gauge it off. I mean, it's not a contact sport, but the amount of force that our body endures as track sprinters is quite substantial. And my body has been punished a bit over the years, but we've bounced back. I've had major injuries a lot through my career, which I think has been an interesting pathway for me. But besides that, I've had being able to come back. I've been told by docs to hang it up twice now.
Right. Okay.
And both times, but both times I've always come back really well. And to a point where I've done better than I was before. So yeah, that's sport.
All right, yeah. Cool. I mean, it sounds like you're very resilient, and I think that's a really important quality. So, and psychologically, kind of going through those experiences, and obviously, yeah, they're tough at the time, but that whole kind of idea of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so, from a psychological perspective, I'm sure that you've developed a lot of like mental fortitude, which sort of like in the long run, there's a potential benefit from kind of having been gone through those injuries. If we cycle it right back then, so to your childhood, what other sport, or were there any other sports that you were involved in? I know you got little athletics out in Australia, which is quite a popular route for some of the athletes to get involved in there. But was there anything? Did you do that, and was there anything else that you did?
So I didn't do Little A's.
All right, okay, I
but
plugged that for no reason.
Up Little A's, love Little A's. I didn't do it. I did everything else. I did every sport under the sun. I'm a big advocate for that. If you're trying to specialize when you're a kid, then you're doing it wrong because you don't know. I fell into track and field. It was an accident that I'm doing sprinting, and now I'm top whatever in the world. So yeah, I did rugby union, rugby league, AFL, which is our kind of football,
Aussie
soccer,
rules football,
Aussie rules, soccer. I've done surf lifesaving. I did for a number of years. I've played basketball.
Okay.
I've done and hated swimming. I've played every sport. Touch football, which is another thing. I don't know if you guys have it there, but I've played every sport under the sun, and I did a few of them to a relatively high level. I played rugby union and AFL for a number of years, and got to a developmental level where I was starting to make development sides. But Again, got forced out for injuries. So I was relatively good at a young age. So I played up, and then that kind of led to my downfall because my shoulders just ended up getting screwed. So I
Right.
actually, and now it impacts a lot of my strength. I do no powerlifting, so no power cleans. I do no Olympic lifts whatsoever, purely because I don't have any structure in my shoulder, so I can't lift in certain directions.
Okay.
Um, Even squats, I use a spider bar, safety bar,
I think I've seen that on
purely
your
because
Instagram. Yeah.
yeah, in this position, I've dislocated my shoulder before. So
Right. Yeah.
and if I put any weight on that, I've got no strength in this position here with my arms spread. So
Okay.
yeah, but I've done every sport under the sun. And that injury I got told by a doc to hang up the boots.
Right.
at
Okay.
at 15, they said, "Oh, look, you're gonna have to get a dual shoulder reconstruction to keep playing rugby." And I wanted to be a wallaby.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like,
For sure.
okay, uh, our local team, the Reds, that's my pathway, and then I can be a wallaby. I'm quick. I've got really good ball skills. Let's go. Got told I needed surgery at 15 on both my shoulders, and I'd be walking around like a mummy. And I stuff it. Like, I'm still growing. I don't know. And back then, so that's 8 years ago, the surgery that they were doing on shoulders to recon that joint wasn't too good. And it didn't
Okay.
have a good longevity to it.
Right.
So I stuff it. I'm too young. I'll just go become a bloody finance broker or something.
Right.
Just focus on my studies. And then within 3 months, I kind of made my regionals and then my state championships in sprinting. So I'm like,
Okay.
oh, I'm actually not bad at this. I made my first nationals. Didn't know how to do a block start. My first nationals had both blocks set up equal,
Oh,
and
right. Yeah.
jumped out and
You're
then
doing one of
started
the
running.
pen jumps and power starts. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sure, that's what I was emulating.
Yeah. No, you pulled it
I
off.
Oh, I pulled it off. I went out in heats and was shocking. I think some of the girls ran faster than me that weekend, but yeah, fell into it from there, and then kind of thought, okay, well, I'll give this a crack. I can save my shoulders in this, and then that kind of transitioned to starting to get pretty good. I made national finals within the next 12 months. So the next year I went to nationals and got a silver, I think. And I
Okay.
was like, oh, I'm half decent at this. Not, nothing to kind of alert anyone that I'm amazing and going anywhere with it. And then 12 months after that, or 6 months after that, I think, I ran a 10.6 windy um, at, I would have been, yeah, 16, I think. But,
Okay. Yeah.
but, yeah. And then I think at that stage, my coach moved on, and I kind of was like, okay, well, I want to keep going at this. So I'll hit up my current coach, Paul DeBella,
Hmm.
who is local to me. And I knew he was kind of like in at my track was like the elite squad, whereas I was
Yeah.
taking the
Okay.
piss. I barely rocked up to training half the time. I was just a school lad that was liked to do sport, but a lot of the training stuff, I was like, oh, that's a bit naff, especially after school. I wanted to hit the gym with the boys or something. As soon as I went with Paul, I remember he took me through the warm up. I finished my 460s as part of my warm up or whatever, at varying pace, and then I was puffing. I'm like, okay, mum, let's go home. What do you mean? We've got the session to do. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm cooked here. But yeah, 3 months after training with Paul, pretty much to the day, I broke my state record, my state youth record in 100 meters. And then, oh, bloody Paul, he got me running too quick, and I started getting some injuries. Because of course, when you're
Yeah.
16 at that stage, and you're running 10 mid, your body's not ready for that. So I was 74 kilo or something. Like, I was light as anything by that stage, and wasn't able to keep up. Had some injuries, and then that's when Paul really taught me a lot of training techniques, and a lot of his implementation went into my rehabilitation for that kind of stuff. And at
Okay.
that stage, Athletics Australia had noticed me as a talent, so I went through their target talent program, and we went to some camps and learned a lot more.
Mhm.
Came back from injury and broke an Australian record. So yeah, broke the junior record for Australia, and it's just been kind of same cycle since then. Run fast, get hurt, rehab, run faster. So
All right, cool. Do you know what? That ends on a positive.